Hey, welcome. It's 8 o'clock. We'll probably get started here about 8:05. I want to welcome you to Mark Martin's webinar tonight with Navionics. We're going to do a little ice fishing stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about ice fishing. And then if y'all will hold your questions to the end, I'll remind you again later on before we get started about being able to enter your questions under the questions tab on the GoToWebinar. And then when we get to the end of the presentation, I'll come back on and ask Mark some of your questions about ice fishing. So I guess I'll start out. Mark, welcome, and thanks for taking the time tonight to do this. Since we're talking about ice fishing, let's talk about Twin Lake, Minnesota. What's the weather like?
Well, it's Twin Lake, Michigan, but it's
Michigan.
probably about like Minnesota right now. It's pretty cold. It's about 25 degrees. At least it's not snowing. It's making ice. So that's a good thing because I got my schools coming up here. We're leaving on the 3rd for the first one at Houghton Lake, Michigan, and that's almost full right now. So I'm looking forward to teaching some new people this year.
So tell me, I guess we'll talk about it now. It'd be a great time. Tell me about your schools and what you do and all that. Let the listeners, as we gather a few more listeners before we get started, just talk briefly about those.
Well, the school's been in existence. It's not my baby. It's Gary Roach over in Minnesota. Him and I became business partners, and he had the school over there 30 years ago. It is right now, and I was a little fledgling. He took me under his wing, and he taught me how to teach people. And Al Linder would be there, and the rest of the in fisherman group, and then we'd invite outdoor writers to come to these events, and we show them all the newest, latest, and greatest things that will help you catch fish. And so we take them out, and then some. Where they go back, and after a few years, they said to both of us, they said, "Well, could you take some of our listeners, viewers, and so on, that just normal people with you?" And so we started to implement just the average person and teach them how to fish too. But it also gave the media that was attending it somebody else to talk to besides just professional fishermen and get their perspective of what was going on. So it made it better, really, and it made us better. It made us do even a better job of teaching. And so after a while, they said, "Mark, we're getting too busy with other things. You can take it over, take it back to Michigan or wherever you want to take it. And we know you can do a good job because, we see what you've done so far with us." And I did, and we've kind of had it all over the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and the Lower Peninsula for the last 30 years, between Minnesota for quite a few years, and then Upper Peninsula and Lower Peninsula of Michigan.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The growth is incredible of the sport. We've talked about it, and we'll tell the people attending tonight. Just awesome being inducted into the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. That's just I guess, top career goal maybe of all us fishermen.
Yeah, and you don't expect it when it happens. It's quite a blessing. And I have been blessed over my career of being able to have the right people that took me under their wings, and just having the right people in place, great outdoor writer friends, great pro staff. And we all kind of, when you surround yourself by all good people, as I have been able to do all my life, it brings everybody to the top. And that's what I tell people, share your knowledge and help somebody else, and they'll help you, and rub each other's back in this business. And it seems to work for me, and I know it'll work for anybody else in any other business that they pursue.
Yeah. Well, hey, we'll get started. We got about 40 people that are attending right now. I'll just remind everybody again, we're recording this webinar. It'll be available on the Navionics YouTube channel probably in about 1 to 2 days. And you can watch it again if you want to and get the tips. Save your questions to the end. If you want to type a question during the webinar where it says questions, just go ahead and type it. And hey, Mark, I'll let you take over, and I'll just stand by and listen, bud.
Okay, well, we're going to talk to you about how to attract fish to You know, a lot of times, and we kind of learned this, I think, at various places, because sometimes in ice fishing, it gets to be dangerous just to move around, especially with people that um, have, um, I guess, not quite the proper clothing and everything. And I can remember a few times being at Lake Gogebic in the UP, and it was 60 below plus wind chills, and it was 25 to 27 below normal temperatures. So going outside and getting people out and, well, let's move here, let's move there, wasn't the option. And so I had learned years before from Gary and Al and all the rest of my mentors, you know, that, hey, you know, they said pound on the bottom, pound on the bottom. So, you know, you take a lure, and I don't care what kind of lure, whether it's little slab wrap right here, and you pound it, you know, bang it right on the bottom, just bam, bam, bam. You don't have to do any certain rhythm or anything. Just make sure you're stirring that bottom up, and you just keep pounding on it. And you watch your electronics for the fish to come in. A lot of times they'll come in so fast, they'll just pull it right off the bottom and grab it as you're jerking on it. But the key is just keep making a lot of dirt and noise, and the fish will come in to you because you create a feeding situation down there. You're creating the dirt flying up. You're creating the noise that when fish are banging into the mud and getting wigglers and crayfish and anything else that's down in the rocks and in the mud, you're creating that sound, and they tune in on it and they start coming. You know, so now you've got them focused in on, you know, you banging on the bottom, and you know, you can do it for 30 seconds, 20 a minute if you want to. And then when you stop, you just hit it, lay on the bottom and just pick it up about yay far off the bottom, and just hold it tight line, because a lot of times all you're going to feel is a tick. If you get a great big slammer, hey, anybody can tell that. So if you don't see anything in a few minutes, just bang on the bottom. But the other thing you want to do while you're doing that, because you're allowed 3 rods here in Michigan, and a lot of places you're allowed 3, at least 2 in some places. uh, Utilize that, because that's part of your attraction. So what I do is I have another rod with a dead rod, and it can be just without a slip bobber. It can be just a rod with another lure like this Northland right here. Could be another lure like that, just hanging suspended. You want it suspended, so you want to set the bobber so that it's at least 2 to 3 feet off the bottom. So what happens when you suspend you're bouncing one off the bottom, you got another one suspended up off the bottom, and the fish can hear and feel that one over here that you're banging on the bottom, and they come in and they're looking. Well, they're going to see the one 2 3 feet off way before they ever get to you. And that's really the key, is making yourself visible that way, with a visual thing, and with their lateral lines by pounding it on the bottom too. So they're coming for the sound on the bottom, and all of a sudden they see this uh, suspended bait, whether it's a lure, whether it's a minnow swimming around up above it, you know, suspended below a bobber. Even a tip up, having a tip up outside your shack would be your third rod, and that's suspended out there too. So now you're attracting them in visually with the tip up, with your bobber, with your maybe putting it on a 5-gallon bucket, putting it in a rod holder, the other one, but you keep pounding the one right on the bottom all the time to keep the attention up. And you watch your fish finder. And the thing is when you're watching your fish finder, uh, you want to keep an eye. Let's see, I got it right here. Let's see what I have here. Um, I don't know if I can get it to work the right way here. Uh, Okay, let's see what I got here. Yeah, that's not going to work too good, is it? With I wanted to show on here the bottom. Well, I'm going to have to explain it because I didn't check to see if this was going to work, but it shines right back in the thing. Too bad. What you want to do is watch your fish finder, because not only are you going to tell when a fish is right below you, and the manufacturers don't tell you this. Whether you have a flasher, whether you have a liquid crystal, you can start seeing fish depending on the depth of water you're fishing in. If it's say 20 feet, 25 feet, whatever like that, you can see fish instead of being just right under your cone angle right here. You're going to see fish way out to the side, at least double or triple that distance of that cone angle. People go, oh, where are you going to see them? You mean I can see fish? Well, yes, what happens is you have your bottom, that is the normal bottom, where a fish comes in, and it'll only be a straight line if you got a liquid crystal. If you got a flasher, you'll see it fluttering up above. You know, you'll think, oh, there's a fish. Oh, now I see one up here. You can go up to it. Well, on a flasher, on a liquid crystal, anything like that, where you're going to first notice them is right here below the bottom. That's where I look. When you start seeing fish that are way outside your cone angle, I don't never look, above the bottom up here. That's pretty obvious to me when I see one up there where it is. But I want to be prepared, and I watch the fish down below the bottom, where you see the bottom on your liquid crystal, or you see the bottom on your flasher. You'll see on a flasher, you'll see it fluttering just below the bottom, just like a fish would be if it was above the bottom. And I'm sure every one of you notice at some time when you're using a flasher, you'll see a little flutter down below the actual bottom that looks like a fish that would be above the bottom on your flasher. Well, that is a fish, but it's outside your cone angle, one side or the other, behind you, in front of you, whatever. So now you know you've got one out there. So you know that you don't want to do something crazy like, jerking it up so that the fish gets intimidated. That's going to be a real bad thing for you to do. And on a liquid crystal, what you're going to see is this is the bottom right here, and anything above here, you normally see a straight line, or you see your lure going up and down. And what you want to do is watch below the bottom right here. And as a fish comes in at a distance, you'll see a straight line, just like you would if it was up above here. You'll see a straight line below the bottom. And as it comes in and gets closer to your bait, it starts getting closer to the bottom until it finally breaks the bottom and becomes part of the bottom. And you've seen that before, the people that have used liquid crystals, and then pops up above bottom. And people think, oh, it came in right on the bottom. It really didn't come in on the bottom. It came in from a distance because it was below the bottom. By the time it came in, it was coming in fairly fast. You've seen it mix and get thicker on the bottom, then pop up. You should have been able to see that fish way before it even got that far. So when you see that coming below the bottom, watch your fish finders from now on. When you see that stuff, there's a fish on the outside of that cone angle, and start pretending that fish is above the bottom, and pretend it's right there, and do the right things. Don't be jerking and chasing away. The other thing is I never let two people in the shanty jig at the same time. That's just crazy. I'm sure a lot of you watched your cameras, watched your fish finders, and if you're jigging two rods, and you're working it, and your buddy's working his, and he's going to town, you're going to town, there's a fish right there, you're both in competition. Well, one of you has to take it for the team. One of you have to put it in the rod holder. One of you have to put it on a 5-gallon bucket, your bobber or whatever, and that's your rod. You don't you know, your half hour, you're not jigging one of you, and the other one's attracting the fish in. That's just the way it's got to be, because two of you jigging, the fish is ready to hit your lure, and you're ready to catch that fish, and all of a sudden your partner jerks on it, and oh, the fish takes off. I've said, no, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Or if they're using two rods themselves and they're jerking like that, and you know, they, oh, there's one right there, I see it. Okay, he's right there, right there. Oh, I jigged this one a little bit. Well, boom, and the fish, I've watched it so many times. It kind of surprises them to see, you know, a couple presentations going on right there, or maybe they kind of get it out of the corner of their eye. They see a flash and they back up off of it. So one person in the shack always has to have a dead rod and take it for the team. They got to have, just don't think your partner's getting one over on you. Just do it, and you guys will both catch more fish. Because a lot of times they'll come in and they'll hit the dead rod because somebody's jigging the one down below. They come in for that one, but they got their eye on that minnow swimming around on the tip up outside, or they got their eye on the minnow swimming on the end of the lure, or they got their, and they're watching this thing barely moving, and they change their mind. We don't want that one that's too active, and they'll race right up and grab the dead rod a lot of times. And you better have your hand close to your rod holder or to that dead rod sitting on the bucket, because if you don't, it's going to go off that bucket like a rocket. You'll just barely get a chance to see your rod tip bend. Your hand better be right there to grab it. So that's really some of the key, things that, once you bring the fish in and keep attracting them in, and to keep them right there, you can't be getting too aggressive at any time. Aggressiveness is only when you can't see fish below your flasher, below your liquid crystal. You don't see fish, get aggressive, bang the bottom, go nuts. And then as soon as you see a little flutter on your flasher below bottom, start controlling yourself, go back to, hey, there's a fish here. Let's get back to our program. Or both of you could have been doing that before you seen anything. But as soon as you see it, whether it's a liquid crystal or flasher, now you go back to being more subtle on everything you do, because now you've attracted more in. And like I was saying, at Gogebic, the weather was so cold, we had to teach people how to do this. They caught more fish, all of them staying in their shack all day, than they ever had when they were moving around on the ice. Most people caught 20 some fish a day, and that was blowing snow and wind, and we had to get them out every couple hours to start their machines. That's how cold it was. Having chemical hand warmers, them are the little packages with the little chemical in, you shake them up and warm. You gotta have them. Get the body warmers, not just the little bitty hand warmers. Get the body warmers, because you never know. The 18-hour, 12-hour ones, get two of them out, put one in each pocket, because if you go outside or something, all of a sudden your hands are freezing, and one little bitty hand warmer isn't going to do it, but two of them together are going to, and you can put one on top of your hand and one below, so it warms the blood up in the top of your hands, because that's where it flows a lot. You can put it between them, and that's stuff that I do to keep myself warm, because I'm walking from tent to tent a lot of times, from person to person, and helping them out. So I'm kind of exposed to the elements a little bit more, and that's why I personally use ice armor equipment from Clam. And I use the boots, I use the gloves, I use the jackets. They make the parkas and the bibs and flotation equipment now. They have the extremes and the other, just the regular. But I would suggest you look into, if you're going to invest a lot of money in equipment, get yourself a suit so that you can sit there and attract fish all day to you. And the other thing, and I wanted to show you here on my, right here, I'll take this arrow, and I'm going to show you on my screen right here. You know, everybody hopefully can see the screen here showing up, but I'm just going to pick out a few things that would be, you know, similar areas, say around your house or on a lake somewhere. Well, right over here, you'll see there's 19 foot, 20 some foot in this bay right here, 32. You're going to be looking at, you know, especially for walleyes and panfish, you might be looking a lot shallower, and I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. But walleyes in particulars, you know, in pike and predatory fish, you're going to be, you know, looking at, you know, say this 29-foot hump. You're not going to just go right up on top of this hump. You can see right here, you're going to go, and one of you are going to go by that tip, one of you are going to go by this tip, one of you are going to go by that tip, and then somebody's going to go on that inside turn, and that somebody else is going to go on that inside turn. So there's really 5 good areas on that little area there, or go up to this 19-foot spot. There's a point there, there's a point there, and them I would suggest would be the best areas if I was to choose those. This area right up here and this area right here, yeah, the sides are could be good, but the fish seem to locate themselves off of points and little inside turns, and that's where they kind of school up and you know, kind of hold tight and push bait into these areas and feed, you know, and so that's what you're looking for when you go out on a body of water. You know, if you've never been there before, start looking at, you know, at inside turns and points and you know, not just straight edges. And the last thing you want to do is go to a lake and see a whole bunch of people sitting out there on the lake, and you go, wow, look at, they must be catching fish, because everybody does. I used to do it when I was young, and you go over there and maybe you catch some fish. More often than you don't, because those people have already chased the fish away. So just to give you an example of that kind of thing, if you want to, you know, see what they're doing, you know, by all means, you know, don't go barging right in, but go over there and, you know, say that, you know, they're, when you got there, you see, God, they're right on this point right here, right on this thing. There's a bunch of people. They're catching fish, and you find out, well, geez, they're not doing that good. Well, they all chased each other's fish away. And so the first thing you do, you look at your partner and go, well, if you really want to fish those fish that they were on, the fish either went that way down in that inside turn right there, or they went all the way this way down into this little inside turn over here. So you decide, your partner goes this way, you go that way, keep in communication with each other, and be amazed at how many times the fish run down the break until they get to an inside turn. If they got to another point, even a point up here, you know, that's where these fish usually go. They don't like all the commotion, and it puts out bad vibes, and they just spread out. They don't leave the same depth. They'll stay in the same depth, so don't leave that depth. Just make sure you go down either way from them, people, and it'll you know, pay big dividends that way. But I always just like to go out and to a lake and look for those points and inside turns, and if there's, you know, creeks and rivers coming in off of those areas, you know, that can be even a good thing at different times of year. But it brings in, you know, when it runs off, you know, that's the first place the fish are going to go back and be at, you know, in any numbers, is when there is little warm up periods in the wintertime and there's a little runoff. Look for the creeks and river mouths, and they'll purge themselves a little bit, but they also bring in the fish right into those areas, because all the little bugs and minnows and other fish come in there. So do the predator fish come into those areas. So you just start thinking like that, those fish after a while. The thing is, I'm going to show you. Here's a get these. jig and Rapalas here. This is a jig and Rapala right here, but you see I've modified it by putting a larger treble hook right on the bottom right here. You know, I don't use, I always upgrade a hook size or two on a jigging bait such as this jig and Rapala, so when they come and they can get a good hook set in them, it's a bigger hook, and put these Daiichis on, they're sharp, and that's the main thing right there. And if I put bait on this lure right here, if I put bait on it, there's only going to be one hook that I put bait on of these three, because I want it to be balanced. So I take and see that hook goes right up right here and leans against the body in a nice level fashion right there. And you got this one hook dangled down. That's the hook I want to put one minnow on, or minnow head, or half a minnow, or whatever. If I'm going to put the bait on, that's the only hook that I'm going to use right there. And the other thing is, I'm going to show you on spoons too. You know, there's only one hook that you can put a bait on and expect that lure, and I'm going to show you why here, to work right. So you've attracted these fish in, you got to catch these fish. And I've figured out over the years, and it's just not me, it's my whole pro staff and the students, and you keep showing everybody the exact way to do it, and now you're seeing the results and catch all the time. There's only one hook that you want to take and put the bait on, and it's that one right there. It's always going to be where the concave of a spoon, and it goes down to this one right here. You put the bait on there, so when you're jigging it, it goes out, and then you stop jigging it, it'll pendulum right back towards you. Well, what happens, it looks like a minnow going away, and it looks like a minnow coming back that way, and it doesn't outbalance the spoon. You put a little bit of weight on this spoon off to this side of it, or off to this side on the wrong hook, it'll weight that lure and take it the wrong way. It'll make it tumble. You know, just those little things that, you know, it's taken years. That's why I say, you know, when we do these schools, you know, hundreds of years of knowledge amongst all of us, and we've been able to minimize our mistakes. And you find out that's a mistake. Not saying you can't catch a fish if you put it on the wrong hook. I'm just saying you just took your odds and brought it down quite a ways. You know, it's not like you can't catch. And the other thing is, always use split rings on your lures too. Just take these lures and put split rings on them. It makes the lure flutter better, swim better, flash better. It's just a better way of doing things. But when I do this, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. I'll take, open up a brand new pack of the, I like to use a lot of plastic too, but I will use live minnows. But I don't have any live minnows right now, so I got to show everybody how, you know, so now I got to look at this lure. Okay, this hook right here is lining up with the back, so I'm going to use a whole minnow on here. So by using the whole minnow, I take and where I hook that whole minnow so it looks real and it swims with the spoon, is I hook it right, we'll just call this the head end of the minnow, and that's a tail, pretty obvious what it is. And so I hook it right behind the head, and I bring it up like that. And people go, wow, geez, you know, when you do that, you know. But what it does when you're jigging, if you ever jigged a spoon, you know, you're jigging just little jigs, and what happens, that spoon swims out away from the hole, kind of like a jig and wrap almost, and then you stop, it pendulums back. So when you're jigging it, that that minnow looks like it's alive swimming away from the fish, and you stop it and it pendulums back. That spoon turns and it swims back to you with that minnow uh, right out there too. So how you hook your minnow is really key to getting these fish to bite too. So that's real crucial there. Um, the other thing, when you're using, say, your dead rod, and this is all after you've getting these fish coming in and doing the right thing. I just use on this right here, this slip bobber right here. I got a ball bearing swivel right here, a couple split shots, and then I got um, Vanish 6-pound test with a little tiny treble hook right there, number 10. And people go, well, geez, where do you got to know when you want to have this minnow alive, that we're pretending this is a live minnow now. Where do you hook a minnow so that it works? You spent good money on this minnow, all of your minnows. You want to get every last penny out of that minnow. So you hook it between the dorsal fin and the tail lightly in the top of the back right there. So it hangs down. Well, geez, why do you want it hanging down? Because a minnow hates to be hanging down for one thing. So what happens here is a minnow takes off and goes swimming, and he's swimming and swimming. He quits swimming and it flutters down like that. Well, he can't take it very long, and he swims back up like that. Well, if you hook this thing like most people do on a tip, and you don't want to do it on a tip up either. You want to hook it right where I did on a tip up. Most people, this is how they hook their minnows. And the minnow, yeah, that looks great. The minnow doesn't have to even work for you. The minnow stays alive all the time because it's not even going to have to work. It's just going to sit there, and pretty soon it might swim around for a while. Then pretty soon it goes, man, I don't feel like swimming. I can just hang out, and that's what they do, hang on the end of the hook. So you want to make that minnow uncomfortable so that it's always working for you by putting the hook down there towards the tail and past the dorsal fin, so it always is hanging down, and it's got to swim to hang the right way. So them are the key ways to hook your bait, whether you're using spoons, and you can use head part on a spoon while you're jigging, the tail part, the whole minnow. But when you're hooking the minnow, it's crucial where you're hooking it and how you're hooking it to make that minnow work for you and look alive at all times. So it's really something that you got to pay attention to at all times. And I'm going to show you. Okay. Here we have this the Northland lure right here. Okay, and I have crystal line on here. Sometimes I use all fluorocarbon. I use a lot of fluorocarbon on my reels too, and just put a swivel right in here. There's my swivel, and what I do, because when you're using it, whether you're using it on a tip up, whether you're jigging, whatever, that spoon or whatever you're using, even the minnow is going to spin around in a circle, and it's going to twist your line up after a while. So I use a small ball bearing swivel, and you see, people go, wow, did you see that big long tag end on that? Man, he don't even cut nothing off on his line. What reason would there be to cut the line on that? To make it look pretty? the fish don't go up there and check out every piece of terminal tackle on your line. Look at this. There's another aspect. There's my swivel right there, and there's my snap with that big tag end hanging off of that. What you do by cutting these things off right there, you're cutting it off, making it look pretty for you, but the fish don't pay any attention to that. They, I mean, if they paid any attention to it, what about the other 100 and some yards of line you got going to the reel right here? What about all this that's down in the water? Aren't they going to be just as afraid of that as this little piece of tag in that you got right there? So think about it. Don't outfool yourself here. But what happens when you cut that line off real short? I'm sure a lot of you know by now, and you already said it. You get a pigtail when you reel in where the line's curly cued from the knot sliding through because you cut it so close, and when you put a lot of pressure on that knot, it pulls through because it wasn't cinched all the way down. Even if you think you got it cinched all the way down, after you cast it a lot, trolled it a lot, jigged it a lot, it loosens up in the water and it can slide through. So in order to minimize my mistakes, and that's how we all learn is by mistakes, I leave a tag in so I don't have to have a sad story that I lost the biggest fish of my life, the nicest fish of the day. I'm going to lose $10,000 in a tournament because of it. And that's reasons why I do this, because I have lost $10,000 in a tournament over foolish little knots that got cut too short. And that's the little cross-lock snap. I use the Berkeley cross-lock snaps. I use, and it allows that lure to, swivel, spin, flutter right. If you tie directly to it, you're going to catch fish doing that, tying directly to it, but you're not going to catch as many as if you put a cross-lock snap on there and a split ring on your lures to make this lure actually work the right way here. So remember that you want to have, and like I say, I use, even if I don't have two different kinds of line together, like this is crystal and this is 6-pound Vanish fluorocarbon. Excuse me. I sometimes I have just 6-pound Vanish fluorocarbon on the reel, 6-pound leader, but I still have a swivel in between it so that I don't get any twist up. But 6-pound fluorocarbon doesn't have much stretch. It has more stretch than crystal. So I'm going to have a little more sensitivity with this crystal, but I'm not losing a whole lot because fluorocarbon has stretch, but not very much either. So whichever way you go, and people say, well, geez, the northern pike will bite you out. Well, if it used 6-pound and it's fairly thin, it gets between their teeth a lot of times, and you can land those northern pike. Also, another thing is you can turn it on to back reel on your reel and just have enough so that your rod tip is barely bent over so that you can keep tension on it but not break the line easily at all. And people say, well, geez, bluegills, sunfish, and perch, you're not catching them either. And also the thing is when you're fishing bluegills side by side, if one of you are just holding still all the time, you're gonna grab one of my little teardrops here. It's one of my bluegill teardrops right there by Northland there. And them are some great ones. But what you want to do is, if you're not seeing your bluegills or perch or crappies, on your screen or anything, this little tiny teardrop right here hitting the bottom, just take it and bang it right on the bottom. Bang, 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 bang. Will draw those panfish in too. You think it's just for predator fish? No, it's for all fish. All fish hear that same noise And if you and your buddy are fishing next to each other, if you're not seeing anything, both of you should be hitting the bottom. But as soon as you start getting bluegills and crappies and perch and everything around you, you know, one of you should just kind of barely hold, maybe just barely wiggle it, and the other one jiggle it like they normally would. But I would not suggest that both everybody going like that, because a bluegill would, I've watched them, they come right up to it and they'll back right away from it as soon as it starts moving. So a lot of times it has to sit still. So the guy jigging, he may be catching them for a while, or maybe not at all. The person not jigging it and barely moving it, you know, just holding it still, you still move it a little bit. They're the one that's going to be catching the fish right there. So, you know, don't think that it's just for walleyes and predatory fish and lake trout and everything else that you got to be banging the bottom. You got to be banging the bottom for all fish, because all fish feel and sense it at all times. They can come from a long ways, and remember, always have one of your dead rods way up, a tip up way up. You know, it makes a big difference on, you know, how many fish you're going to eventually get right there. So I know, you know, want to save some time for questions and answers from people. I don't want to, I could keep right on talking because I got to catch myself and kind of stop and make sure everybody understands what I have been talking about, and maybe have to clarify myself on some things. So if anybody has any questions, please write the moderator, and we'll try to answer.
Hey, good information. Good information. Just questions on the side there, folks, and we'll read them to Mark and get him to answer them. Just to give you a heads up, this webinar is being recorded for the Navionics webinar series. We have them all posted on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and search Navionics channel and find them. If you're ice fisherman, and that's why you're on here tonight, we have another webinar coming up from Bernie Kef. Is that how you say his name, Mark? Do you know?
Yeah.
Bernie's doing one on December the 18th at 8 o'clock. We'll post some more stuff about that, but it's improving your lake trout fishing with ice fishing tactics. So that ought to be cool on December the 18th. Let's jump into some questions and we'll see what's going on. How long a rod for walleye fish on Lake Winnebago you usually use?
Well, you know, depends on the weight of the lure that I'm using, but I'll use a medium light to medium action rod, you know, on the average, so that I can feel the fish bite. And the fish, sometimes when they come up, if you're using too heavy of a rod and they just suck it in, that medium heavy won't bend and they'll feel it and get rid of it real fast. So medium light to medium heavy. In about, you know, if I'm walking around, I'll use a 4-footer so that I'm not bent over and getting bucket back as I'm walking around. I can stand up. Yeah. So I like to use a longer rod, 4 feet, and walk around with that if I'm in a tent, anywhere from 24 to 26 inches.
Okay. Got a question from Lonnie. He wants to know, how often do you use the zoom mode on your Lowrance electronics when you're looking at the fish?
All the time, you know, because I'm watching the bottom or below the bottom so much that I can actually see that line below the bottom, because that's where I'm really watching, not watching above bottom. That's the last place I'm going to see them. The first place I'm going to see these fish is below the bottom as they come in, and then they'll come right up and be part of the bottom, and then they'll pop up where everybody notices them above. But I use the zoom all the time.
So you zooming in and out, Mark, a lot of times?
No, I leave it zoomed in. If I want to see my higher rods, or if now I zoomed in so far and oh Jesus, did that fish that I just seen below bottom, he disappeared on me. He didn't come above bottom. He didn't become part of the bottom. Did he go back down? Well, now I'll zoom out and see if all of a sudden sometimes they can be right up at your dead rod and you didn't even know it because they came up so fast that you missed them coming through the bottom a lot of times, or they backed up, turned around, came back and swam in real fast up real high. And you didn't catch it below the bottom in time. So yeah, I will come out and look again.
Yeah, the one thing I think a lot of people get confused with the zoom, and somebody told me this years ago at a seminar, it is using a flashlight. If you take a flashlight, that's your cone angle. So when you go to zoom in, you're actually losing that. You're getting it real low. And then if you don't see anything when you rezoom, you open it back up. So that's just a little. This question is about a gentleman that bought a Humminbird Helix. He has the ability to change the cone angle and transducer chirp frequency. Can you explain how this will help or change the various depths when fishing?
Well, I wish I had my Humminbird Pro staff with me because that's who I usually call in. I'm a Lowrance guy. I know how the Humminbirds work, but I'm not an expert on it. For me to stick my neck out, and the person asking the question probably knows a little bit more about it. But having everything turned up as high as you can on those things will give you a little added advantage. I know that because I watched the guys adjust it. I should ask them a little bit more about it, but they're asking a Lowrance guy about that that doesn't use it. I could confuse you from what I think I know about it. I don't want to talk off the top of my head because then I get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Hey, Jim, if you're still online, if you'll email me, it's tbranch@navionics.com, and I will get your question answered for you from the guys from Humminbird. We've got friends with a couple guys that work over there, and I'll get somebody to answer your question.
Thanks, Tom.
Is writing in tonight, and he wants to know, what do you think about the spring bobbert?
Oh, I love spring bobber, especially for panfish, and some of my pro staff even have thicker spring bobbers that they use for walleye fishing, especially on their dead rods, so they can see the minnows swimming around a lot easier, and they notice the fish grabbing it before the rod tip bends. It gives them a little extra. They love their spring bobbers, and I love my spring bobbers for panfish fishing because it gives me that added advantage of them. A lot of times it'll come, the weight of the teardrop makes it bend a little bit, and if a fish comes in, I notice it come up. A lot of times I set the hook, and a lot of times you see it barely go down. So a spring bobber really puts everything in perspective. So keep using them.
Yeah, that's good. Michael has a question on how would you set up a lure if you're limited to a single hook point? In New Hampshire, where he fishes, you can't use treble hooks, though. Treble hooks, though the ice with bait, bare trebles are okay. Oh, I guess he's talking about putting a minnow on a hook. You have to use single hook.
A single hook, yeah. Just make sure that single hook. And I forgot to elaborate on that too. The hooks, if that one right here doesn't line up with the back and it's twisted off the side, take it off the split ring, turn the hook around and put it back on until you get that one, on there. But the same thing as with a single hook, put it on and see where that single hook is. And as long as that single hook lines up with the back of that spoon where the concave side is right there, it's just as good as a treble hook right there. So just make sure that single hook is coming up the back side of a spoon or something like that. I have no problem. In fact, I like single hooks a lot, and I use red Daiichi single hooks when I'm using tip ups at times too. It's easier for the fish to suck them in and not know that other 2 trebles hooks are in there. Good question. I like that because it brings out stuff that I do that I would have forgot about.
Yeah. A question tonight from Andy. Do you prefer long sweeping inside turns or sharper triangulations?
Uh, the, sh- the
Matt.
sh- yeah, I like the sharper ones. You know, the ones that come right in, like this would be really cool, like where I got my arrow on my thing right there. That'd be nice if you had them all like that, but these sweeping one like this, that's still good too. It's better than this flat stretch right here that, you know, you'd be just lucky to sit down where there was a fish. And even if you're waiting, you know, they're just going to come by you and be gone. Where when you're in a sweeping turn or an inside turn like that right here, at least it slows them down long enough and gets you to have them look at your presentation a lot easier.
Are they running bait up on those places? Are they chasing bait?
Yep, yeah, they're chasing bait. They chase bait and bugs. It seems like those inside turns and in points too. So don't forget the points too. Make sure you always look at the points because that's where they seem to ambush a lot of things is off of points, and they push bait fish and stuff into these inside turns, whether they're sweeping or real tight. The tighter they are, it gives them less room to get away from the predator. So if you got this spot right here, the fish in this area, and there's fish in there and there's bait in there, you're going to have fish in there a lot longer than you'll have fish here. But if you do some of the stuff I talked about to keep them attracted in there, they'll be in there all day long.
Yep. Get that Navionics app for your Android or iPhone. It's only $9.99.
That's right. I got it on my iPhone. I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, because that's our textbook in our school. We pull that out every night. Everybody pulls it out of their pockets, and we talk about where we caught fish. And now they can see all the inside turns and points that everybody has fished, instead of trying to explain right off of that yellow house with the flagpole at it. You know, it brings it a little bit more in or off the hot dog or off of the rock island, you know. So everybody, when they leave, they can take that Navionics app wherever they go at whatever lake and feel confident that they're going to be fishing in the right areas.
Yeah. So we got a question tonight from Jonathan. He is a beginner ice fisherman fishing for walleyes, kind of in the Michigan area, and he wanted to know what would be your bait of choice.
My bait of choice, I want to have a dead rod with a slip bobber and a hook, treble hook, real small, or a single hook, just like the other fellow from New Hampshire was saying. and I want to hook that minnow just behind the dorsal fin because I need 2 presentations when I do this. I want a dead rod presentation because I'm going to catch a certain amount on the dead rod. That's going to catch a certain amount of attention, and I'm going to want a lure such as a jig and rapala or a buckshot rattle spoon, something that has rattles, something that I can pound on the bottom and track the fish in. Like the jig and wrap, I can do that too. The jig and wrap, oh, and I almost forgot to tell people. All of a sudden, when I fish the weeds are killer. And people go, well, fish the outside of the weeds. No, yeah, you can, but the fish come to those weeds and they stop before they come out, or if they come down the edge, they come down the edge and they're just on the inside edge and they'll dart out and pick something out. But if you want to really catch fish out of the weeds, we found out over the years, get right in the middle of the weeds and take a jig and rapala or a spoon and start ripping the weeds out below your hole until you've cleaned them all out, put them up on the ice. And now you created so much mud and gunk down there. You think you trashed the area, but you made so much noise. These fish are coming through the weeds now, and they're looking for what's making all this noise. And I'll tell you what, you're going to be surprised. And then your electronics aren't going to work. I don't care what you have, because there's so many weeds around, they'll pick up them because of the cone angle you were telling them about. And what happens is you get your underwater, like your Markham camera out, and you put it down there. And I like the Recon with a little tiny thing that looks like a little black bug. And you got to kind of watch it after you stir it up, because they think it's a bug or something because of all the cloudiness, and they'll come up and grab it. So don't just let that lay around either. But using a camera, you'll do better because you'll see the fish. As long as you can see your lure, you'll see the fish. And when they come through the weeds after you do that, they come through with a vengeance. They come through with their dorsal fins up, and they're just moving like a tiger coming out right after you. Where most of the time when you don't make all that commotion and rip weeds out and you're on the outside of the weed, they come and stick their nose out. When I've seen them on camera, they're real hesitant and they back up and go. But in the weeds, they feel confident and safe. And so I just gave some more people ideas there, I hope.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. My buddy's sending me deer pictures. He's been tracking deer all night.
Oh, tell them good luck.
Yeah. So, hey, we'll finish up. It's almost 9 o'clock. I got one more question. I thought this was a pretty good one. Lonnie is asking, what about sensitivity? Are you wanting just enough to see your lure, or do you go above or below or whatever? That's a great question.
Oh, it's a great question. On sensitivity, I jack it up until I get so much clutter on my screen. I want to see all the little junk. I want to see all the air blip. And that's one of the big mistakes that the students make in our class. They'll get this brand new equipment, their Hummingbirds, their Garmins, their Lowrances, everything. They bring it, and we go over there and they go, well, we can't see our lure. And we go, well, that's impossible. You must have your transducer at an angle. You got to have, we go over there. No, everything looks right. We look, and they got their gain turned all the way down because they want to save all their battery. I go, hey, like, come on, crank that baby up. And they're going, wow, I can even see bottom a lot better. I go, yeah, and you can see your lure going up and down, and now you're going to see fish coming in below the bottom. And that's the biggest mistake people have. They think they're going to run out of battery by turning it up more. They're using more battery. Well, who cares? You got to see what you're fishing. And so jack it up, learn how to look through the clutter. And even in open water when I'm fishing, I jack my sensitivity as high as I can get. And I learn how to look through the clutter going by, because a lot of times it'll pick up things that, like if the fish are real close to the bottom and that's where they're staying, it'll actually separate them from the bottom when you jack up that sensitivity. So otherwise they just become bottom.
So do you have your transducer on 83 or 200, or what do you usually put on?
200.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to say thanks again, Mark. Appreciate working with us here at Navionics, and enjoy being on our pro staff. And thanks a lot for doing a webinar tonight on ice fishing. We'll, like I said before, we'll have this recorded within the next 2 or 3 days, and we'll put it out there on Navionics YouTube channel. And I'll send you a link, and you can post it on your channel also, and people can watch it. Just appreciate everybody being part of it tonight. And our next ice fishing webinar is December the 18th. You can go to navionics.com and read more about the upcoming webinars we have. We're going to do 3 more ice fishing webinars this year. We've got one, like I said, December 18th. We'll have another one in January and one in February. So we've got some great ice fishing stuff going on. We have launched our ice fishing page on the Navionics website. So we've got some cool stuff on there, and hopefully we can educate more people. And I'll let you close us out, Mark. Appreciate you, bro.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tom. Appreciate it. And glad everybody was able to attend tonight. And if they want to get in touch with me, just go to my Facebook site, my websites, and if you got any other questions, I'll try to get them answered. And you can always give me a call, because I'm here to teach and talk fishing.
Yeah. Thank you, bud. Merry Christmas to you and your family, and we'll talk to you soon.
Merry Christmas to everybody.